Out unless there was a warder with a gun training on us. And they, after being locked up, they used to bring warders from other prisons just to have a look at these people through the window.
In South Africa, we are fortunate to stand as a nation on the shoulders of giants. And unfortunately, today, we've lost one of those giants, but we celebrate that life throughout the programming we have for you today. I'm with Peter Ndoro and Elvis Presley. Very good morning to you guys.
Good morning, and a very, very sad day for South Africa, and I would say even beyond our borders, across the continent and many parts of the world, where Ahmed Kathrada shared his life. And yeah, we'll be paying tribute to him, we'll be speaking to various people and celebrating his life through the course of today. And in fact, one of his fellow prisoners, Dennis Goldberg, today said, we've lost a very, very important man.
And there was only 3 of them left, Peter. Of course, Dennis Goldberg, Andrew Malanga, and of course now, struggle stalwart Ahmed Kathrada that died this morning. And that's why we're asking you the question to our viewers this morning, because we want to focus and honor this man. We're asking you, how would you remember Ahmed Kathrada?
Yeah, I remember him, well, as a very humble, very simple man, and it's kind of his final requests kind of talks to that, Peter. You know, he asked for a very simple burial. He didn't want an official state funeral, for instance. He just wanted a simple burial, which kind of paints a picture of the measure of the person.
You're so right. I think humility is one word that you're going to hear a lot of during the course of the day. You know, we're very privileged with the work that we do, that we're able to meet people such as this. And I remember him being uncomfortable with the term struggle hero. He just said, I just did what I could. I served as well as I could. And when we reflect, it was an important life lived very, very well in service of people right through to the end.
There's a couple of tweets coming through, so Eben, you and Peter can go through them there.
Yeah, I want you to set up to kind of give us the latest news around what is happening with the family and official proceedings. Elvis will be with Griselda Lewis shortly, but before we get there, let's have a look what you guys are telling us, Peter.
So, Temba says he liked people and always was honest and deserved to be president of South Africa.
Interesting view. This one from Malibonga Manyonya, who says, Newsroom, a father of truth. When he speaks, he talks with fear, with no fear of favor. May his soul rest in peace. Rest in peace, Uncle Kathy. That one you'll see all over today.
And Mokhlokhane says his unshaken criticism of the ANC on what he perceived to be the wrongs within its structures, honesty. And that is a theme about this man. He talked about moral correctness and always living a life of truth and honesty. And I think anybody who's interacted with him in any way whatsoever, that's the sense, deep-feeling sense that they get about this important man.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, matters proceeded rather quickly over the last week or so as his health deteriorated. I think it was well reported as to what's developed over the last couple of days. But let's go over to Elvis to hear what Griselda Lewis has to tell us.
Yes, it is a big day indeed, isn't it, Kathy, or Uncle Kathy, as many people would call him. Ahmed Kathrada, born in 1929, he died this morning. Let's now find out from Griselda Lewis what is happening where she is. A very good morning to you, Griselda, and welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Elvis.
Now, we believe that you're at the Wits University Donald Gordon Medical Center there. What is happening there as we speak?
Well, since very early this morning, Elvis, we have been speaking to the family who've been here at the Donald Gordon Medical Center since last night, of course, when they broke the news to us of the passing of this struggle icon. What we do now know is that President Jacob Zuma has officially sent his condolences to the Kathrada family. In a statement released by the presidency, he did indicate that the national flags will fly at half-mast from today. Details of the funeral are also now being made known. We saw President Jacob Zuma there conveying his condolences for the indelible mark that Uncle Kathy has made towards the attainment of democracy in South Africa, saying that South Africa has really lost a hero and that he should always be remembered for the contribution that he has made towards the liberation struggle in this country. Now, what we do know as well is that the funeral service will take place tomorrow at the West Park Cemetery here in Johannesburg. We do understand that amongst those who will be addressing the funeral will be former President Kgalema Motlanthe, as well as former Robben Islander as well, and a struggle veteran in her own right, Mama Sophie de Bruyn. She will also be speaking there, and one of the family members will also give a tribute at the funeral tomorrow. Just to give you some more details that have just emerged here now as well, is that the struggle stalwart, as I've indicated, Sophie de Bruyn, a former Robben Islander, will address mourners as well. But there will be a media briefing at 10 o'clock this morning at the Kathrada Foundation, which will be directed, of course, by its CEO, Nishan Bolton, where further details will be given about that funeral, we understand. But for now, we know that there will be condolences sites where condolences messages can be sent to info@Kathrada-Foundation. If you didn't get that, you can send your condolences to info@kathradafoundation.org. There will be condolences books in the next few hours, which will be placed at several sites. One will be at the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, as well as the Nelson Mandela Foundation as well as at the office of the Premier of Gauteng, David Makhura. Now, what we do know is that when that further details are given of the funeral at that briefing, which will be held at the foundation, the Gauteng Premier, David Makhura, who was also one of the trustees at the foundation, will give details and, of course, send his condolences. He was amongst many other dignitaries who were at the bedside of the family as well, showing their condolences and expressing and giving tribute to this great man that South Africa will now say goodbye to. And what we do understand is that the family is inside at this moment, making final preparations ahead of that press briefing. Unfortunately, we're not able to speak to them at this time, but a bit earlier on, I must indicate there, Elvis, when we spoke to the grandnephew of Ahmed Kathrada, Aziz Kathrada, he was saying at this time they're a family who are really aggrieved, but are also standing like giants because of the contribution that Ahmed Kathrada has made to South Africa, not only revered in this country, but around the world as well. Remember, in 1992, he was conferred with the highest order of Isitwalandwe, Siaparangwe. Now, when you're given that order, bestowed with that order, is a clear indication of the dedication for so many decades that Ahmed Kathrada had given towards the liberation of this country. Remember, many of the stories that will come through certainly over the next couple of hours is how this son of the soil, as some have indicated, really left school at a very young age, lost his father at a very young age, and decided to take up, together with many others, including Walter Sisulu, as well as Yusuf Dadu, and many others as well, for the fight for freedom in this country. So many stories are being told. We're expecting the tributes to continue pouring in, but one can certainly mention at this point is that a man of humility, of the caliber of the late Ahmed Kathrada, is something that will certainly live on in this country. We're seeing now President Jacob Zuma also saying that the spirit with which he lived for the dedication and selflessness that he had shown, South Africans should surely portray in the many years to come. So that's what we have for you at this point at the moment, the details finally emerging of that funeral to take place tomorrow at the West Park Cemetery. But I think, just to mention, I think it's something that I've really been mentioning since yesterday there, Elvis, in that, you know, in the 1950s, this was someone who at a very young age, together with the African National Congress and the Indian Congress as well, had really stood up against the suppressive laws in South Africa. Recall the defiance campaign against the unjust laws, including those of segregation, where he was very instrumental in the Lenasia community as well, when the Indian community itself was being suppressed during apartheid, where together he came with the African National Congress and fought the suppression of the time. So the many stories, I guess, that will be told. And remember, of course, he's but one of the many now, the Robben Islanders, and who have now passed on. Some of those who are remaining at this time, the Rivonia trialists that remain at this time. I understand that the SABC will also be speaking to Dennis Goldberg and Andrew Mlangeni as well. Those who have certainly been at the forefront, together with many others, of course, many also saying that, you know, Uncle Kathy was someone who showed immense humility. He never wanted, we understand from one of the trustees of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, whenever they spoke to him about the programs that needed to be put in place. You'd recall most recently when South Africa was really embroiled in a number of racist incidents, where they spoke to him about that to denounce some of the acts that we've seen in South Africa in recent time. Those were the very issues, issues that plagued South Africa, that these struggle icons, amongst many others, had fought against. So for that to really raise its ire in South Africa in present times was something that really sat very difficult in the heart of someone like Ahmed Kathrada. So those are certainly the sentiments that we're expecting to come through here today as these preparations get underway and the condolences continue to pour in. But what I can certainly also indicate at this time is that as those tributes continue to pour in, this family is saying, while they stand tall, he must be remembered for the contribution certainly that he's made. The flags, of course, will fly at half-mast, as I've indicated. There will also be an official memorial service which will be held. The presidency has indicated in that statement that details of that will be made known very soon, we understand, perhaps at the briefing that is scheduled to take place at 10 o'clock. That will give us a bit more insight. But that funeral to take place tomorrow at the West Park Cemetery.
Just to go back, you were covering the story from yesterday, Griselda. What was the mood like at the hospital, and who were some of the members of the public and family that came through yesterday?
You know, Elvis, when we received that correspondence from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation indicating that his condition had deteriorated, it was the very first indication that we had that he was no longer in good health and that it had deteriorated. We also heard news that he was in and out of consciousness, and basically while trying to acknowledge some of the dignitaries and some of his comrades who were at the bedside as well. Some of them, I understand, were quite emotional inside to see such a man who stood so tall during very difficult times in South Africa to deteriorate to that condition. Many saying, I guess perhaps we should let him go because of his age. But the Gauteng Premier, of course, and the Gauteng province, I must say, the ANC in Gauteng was really quite well represented here yesterday, offering support to the Kathrada family. The chairperson of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation as well, Minister Derek Hanekom, who has described the loss of Ahmed Kathrada as great sadness in him losing a revolutionary friend, a hero for this country. Just some of the people who were here, but also recall that Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela was also here yesterday to also come and support the Kathrada family. So really what we've seen is many of those who were inspired by him. We heard there the chairperson of the ANC in Gauteng, Paul Mashatile, yesterday saying they were inspired and mentored by the likes of Ahmed Kathrada. Remember, when Ahmed Kathrada had lost his father, he really saw Walter Sisulu as one of the people who had mentored him during very difficult times, inspiring them to go to the front line and deal with the unjust society that was then during South Africa as very difficult times. So, you know, we've seen many people come in and out of here since yesterday. Great support that has been given to the family. They're really saying that they don't really feel like they're alone at this time, and I think they're really feeling as well the appreciation as well as the condolences and the love that is being shown by many South Africans, as well as the tributes that are coming from internationally as well. We're not just talking about someone who went on to inspire South Africans or people around the continent for his contribution, but we're talking about a rare breed, many would say, of liberation heroes who fought selflessly, a rare breed, some would say, that is not seen today. Remember that Ahmed Kathrada in recent times had been very critical of the current leadership of the African National Congress. But what is said here today is that he was an ANC member through and through from the very beginning, when he began this journey to decide to take up the fight for liberation in South Africa. So a man that has been being revered here today and being celebrated as not just belonging to South Africa. He belongs to the entire world, being described as an internationalist as well. So certainly I think, the tributes that will continue to see being poured in are that of a man who from a very young age until the end really fought and stood up against injustice in any form of that matter. And remember, of course, when he was quite frail, just to bring it much recent to the local government elections. And the reason why I keep mentioning this is because it was during that time when you could see that his condition was deteriorating. He was no longer of the strength that we had seen Ahmed Kathrada, but many are saying that he was always calling to ask how he could assist to try and garner support in the run-up to those local government elections. He always saw the need to help, and that's certainly the man, I think, which will be celebrated here today moving forward. And I guess the main question now that remains is how that legacy will be maintained and how that legacy will move on. I must say, the kind of somber mood that we've certainly not seen since the passing of the former president Nelson Mandela. Certainly they were in a class of their own. The caliber of men that fought during the liberation struggle of that time are certainly the likes of the now late Ahmed Kathrada and the late Nelson Mandela. So when you club those two together, and with many struggle icons as well, your Yusuf Dadus, your Andrew Mlangenis, and many others as well, the sentiment is quite clear, and it's almost the same, that these are men, and of course many other women like Mama Sophie de Bruyn, who will speak at the funeral tomorrow, who gave selflessly for the people of this country. And it's quite an appreciation, I must say, for many people, including the young, of course, who would want to understand what this legacy means for them and how certainly that can be preserved.
Zelda, we thank you so much. You'll give us an update a little bit later as in terms of the funeral arrangements and the final arrangement that's going to take place. Thank you so much for that report. That's our reporter on the scene there at the Donald Gordon Hospital, of course, giving us the latest, Griselda Lewis. Now, remember that you can converse with us, joining the conversation on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. We're asking you the question, how do you remember Ahmed Kathrada? This one from DV Musi Mokhatlane says, as Shakespeare stated, the evil that men do live after them. In this case, the opposite is true for you, says Victor Mokhotlane. This one from Rafilwe says, what I remember about Ahmed Kathrada is just how much Madiba was fond of him. Alex Motapo says, Uncle Kathy, there will be not enough words to explain the unshaken, constant Northern Star. Stephen Maloto says, Uncle Kathy was a man of great humility. He was a voice of the voiceless. He sacrificed a lot for South Africa. Rest in peace, Ahmed Kathrada. Now, these are some of your comments. You can keep them coming and we'll read them as we continue. But we continue with this special broadcast with Peter Ndoro.
Elvis, thanks very much indeed. Yeah, today we'll be paying tribute to struggle stalwart Ahmed Kathrada. In fact, there's a whole generation of young people who perhaps don't know so much about this man. He started his life, of course, in Schweizer Reneke, which is a small town in the northwest province, about 60 kilometers from Freiburg. And if it wasn't for the apartheid system and its education system at the time, his story might have been different, because as young as 8, because he couldn't get a school where he was forced to go to Johannesburg, and that was at 8 years old. At 12 already he began getting into politics, and then they say the rest, as they say, is history. But we'll unpack that history for you. Let's take a look at this package of Ahmed Kathrada, just to catch us up, particularly the younger ones who perhaps don't quite know his story and his contribution. Let's take a look.
In my underground days, I was given the name of Pedro Pereira.
Born on August the 21st, 1929 in the small rural northwest town of Schweizer Reneke, Ahmed Kathrada, or Uncle Kathy, as he was fondly known, attended an Indian school in Johannesburg. This is where he met, among others, Dr. Yusuf Dadoo and Yusuf Kachalia, leaders of the Transvaal Indian Congress. Kathrada became involved in politics at an early age and joined the Young Communist League of South Africa. Later, he was elected the Secretary General of the Transvaal Indian Youth Congress. And as a student at the University of Witwatersrand, later represented the Congress at the World Youth Festival of 1951 in Berlin. In the 1950s, as a result of the growing cooperation between the African and Indian Congress, Kathrada came into close contact with ANC leaders such as Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu. When the ANC was banned in 1960, Kathrada continued his political activities, despite repeated detentions and increasingly severe house arrest measures against him. He went underground in early 1963.
We were discussing some political document, and we had to go back to Lily's Leaf Farm because we had no other place to meet. All of us were now hiding from the police. All of us were underground. So we went back to Lily's Leaf, thinking that that is the last meeting we'll have at Lily's Leaf. And it turned out to be the last meeting because the police came and arrested us.
He was tried with Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Dennis Goldberg, among others, in the Rivonia treason trial, charged with organizing and directing Umkhonto weSizwe.
By that time, Umkhonto was already formed, 1961. And they were mainly interested in Umkhonto. And right from the time of the arrest, the police said, you are going to die, you're going to hang. For 3 months that we were in detention and not even allowed to speak to each other, whenever the police came, they said, give us this information, otherwise you're going to hang. You see? Now, of the 8 of us, 2, like Malangeni and Mosweledi, they were not arrested with us. They were in a separate case and they were tortured.
You were also prepared to die for the cause?
Oh yeah, I mean, we all agreed. We all agreed that this is the way we are going to conduct the case. We are not going to apologize.
He was sentenced to life imprisonment on Robben Island in June 1964.
I was put in charge of the communications committee. You see, we, that is about 25 to 30 of us, were completely isolated from the rest of the prison. Now, to clarify what it means to be isolated, President Zuma and Deputy President Motlanthe were in prison for 10 years. We never saw them, and they never saw us. That's how isolated we were from the rest of the prison community.
He was later moved to Pollsmoor Prison and was released on the 15th of October 1989 at the age of 60. On his release, he was given a hero's welcome in Soweto, where he ordered a crowd of 5,000 people. Kathrada remarked, open quote, "I never dreamed I would be accorded such status," close quote. He was elected as a member of parliament in 1994 and also served in the office of the president. He left parliamentary politics in June 1999. He served as the chairman of the Robben Island Museum Council and of the ex-political prisoners committee. For those who knew Kathy, he was an uncle, father, and a brother.
He was so humble, and yet he would get his message across, forcefully. And that he was a dedicated person in those days. He didn't care for money, clothing also. Here was a young man who was prepared to devote all his life to bringing about a change where everyone in South Africa could enjoy the freedom that we did not have those days.
Just to come and visit, and we all get together, the family get together, and nothing serious really, nothing serious about it. That he used to come home, we used to sit together, we used to chat, we had discussions and everything. But I mean, we were all young that time, Nothing.
This is how he wanted to be remembered.
Well, I'd like to be remembered as someone who contributed a little towards freedom, bearing in mind all the time that we at least survived to see freedom. So our contribution relatively was much less than those who made the supreme sacrifice, who never lived to see freedom.
In the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, he left a legacy of the promotion of the values, rights and principles enshrined in the Freedom Charter and the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Lehana Tsotitz, SABC News, Johannesburg.
So that's a look back at a remarkable life lived. Ahmed Kathrada, may his soul rest in peace. Today we're paying tribute to him in this special broadcast that will be giving you rolling coverage throughout the course of the day, giving you details of the plans for his funeral and also hearing from people across South Africa and other parts of the world sharing their thoughts. Now, one person that knew him well and spent a lot of time with him is Dennis Goldberg, one of the last surviving Rivonia trialists, and he was active in the struggle against apartheid. He was imprisoned along with other key members of the anti-apartheid movement, including the late Ahmed Kathrada. Dennis Goldberg joins us now from our Cape Town studios. Thank you very, very much for joining us on this very, very sad day, and I can imagine that it's a very difficult time for you.
Good morning, and to your audience, on what is a very sad day, because you know what I admired about my comrade Cassie in the Rivonia trial together is that we all faced the death sentence. We knew that, and yet he had a calmness about it. The interviews we've done together at the Lilies Leaf Museum where we were all arrested. And he says, we had time to think about it, and we knew we were going to die, and that was it. You don't take up arms against the government and expect to survive. Survival is something quite special. And as he said now in his interview, a lot of our comrades died. 137 were hanged. Over 1,000 were murdered out of hand by the security police and the agencies of apartheid. So, we've contributed. And you know what's special about Cassie, as a comrade of Indian extraction, is that he's able to transcend the oppression of the Indian people to oppression of people on grounds of racism for all the national minorities, but also the majority of African people, and build this into a belief in justice for all. And that's why his foundation now, the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, upholding the principles of non-racism, at a time when amongst all sections of our community, of our population, there's a growing sense of racial exclusivity. It's for me, not for us, against all the beliefs of our liberation movement. It's a very important legacy, and I admire him for it, and the foundation. But can I tell of my sadness for Barbara Hogan, his partner, for his family, for Zora, particularly his secretary niece. We're all devastated, to lose somebody so close and that we've shared so much with.
Mr. Goldberg, he was so young when he went to Robben Island, and yet he displayed a maturity of a man beyond his years. Where did that come from, do you think?
Well, when you're involved in politics and protest and in our prison from age 13, maybe you grow up quick. But you talk about him being young. He says, when I turned 80 years old, he sent me a message to say, and this is his humor and his charm. He said, you were the baby in the Rivonia trial, and even though you're 80 years old now, you're still the baby. And you have to laugh with him about that, you know.
When people talk about him, they talk about how, you know, this moral correctness, always doing the right things, always being on the right side of integrity. Was this throughout his life? What drove him to be this person?
Well, I would say because he joined the Young Communist League early on, where you learned that it's not for you, it's for people in general. It's not for a specific elite, it's for the mass of the people. And he held to those principles till the end. He never gave up on it. He might not have expressed it in the same way. We have all our disillusionments through history and things not going right. But the principle of, can I say, for me and many others, what my comrade Cassie lived was the belief that to be human, you serve others. It's not about self. And so in the end, there was Cassie agonizing about the corruption in the leadership of the ANC at all levels, and then having the courage to write to President Zuma, his comrade, and saying you would serve the country better if you stood down. That takes courage, you know, to defend the the Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, to go to court. You know, Cassie was frail towards the end of his life, but he was still there, standing up for what's right. Where it comes from, why is it such a rare quality? But what an example. I can't explain it. He just had it.
In some ways, I get a sense that perhaps he was a reluctant hero. He just never really wanted that hero status. Do you think that he had a sense of the enormity of his contribution, or he just got on with it?
What a difficult question. He was a modest man. He was a serious man. He was a courageous man. He was compassionate. He was Cassie, he was Uncle Cassie. He was witty. He retained his cool, and he retained his belief. And inherent in this idea of service is you stand back, you let others be in the limelight. I have to confess, I don't like being one of the two survivors of the Rivonia trial, because I'm talking about Cassie, but it throws me into the limelight. And I don't feel, I feel like Cassie that, you know, so many people contributed. We're just part of a great big movement for justice. And what I would have to say is, if we want to honor the life of Ahmed Cassie Castrada, a dear departed comrade, we have to go on. We have to go on and demand that the values we fought for are upheld, that we have a government that's accountable, that we honor the highest courts in our land. We stop ducking and diving to defend individuals, that we uphold the principles written into our Constitution. That's the way we will honor his life. not by giving up and just crying, but continuing till we come to our end. And I pledge myself to do that.
There's a whole generation of young people who are watching this and are probably trying to figure out, you know, we know of Nelson Mandela, we've kind of heard of Ahmed Kathrada. Just how important a man was this man?
You know, I was up at Lily's Leaf the other day, just a week ago, and I experienced what Cassie did experience. A whole new generation of younger, university-educated people, some in government, some in corporations, some in the NGOs, who have to come and speak to Uncle Kathy or Uncle Dennis and to assert their belief in our stand against the violations of our Constitution, and they support it. So what's the importance of the life of Ahmed Kathrada is that people see that it's possible to be selfless. It's possible to uphold principle. And I must say, I'm sure for Kathy, as for others of us, you don't do it for the recognition.
Prisoners Association that represent all the political prisoners in South Africa. When we woke up this morning, we were very much shocked to hear about this bad news. So we felt that we should be able to, you know, pass condolences to the family of Comrade Kathy, and also to deep down our revolutionary banners, and in respect of Comrade Kathy. And when we first actually met Comrade Kathy, it was on transit to Portsmouth, via Portsmouth to Robben Island in 1985. As I represent the generation of young political prisoners that were incarcerated during the 80s. And when we arrived in Robben Island, the first thing that inspired us, it was through his courageous leadership and his legacy that he left in the island via Portsmouth, and in terms of political education, and in terms of his inspiration to the youth, leadership qualities, and inspired us that we should be able to carry the struggle forward, and also that we should not dare to surrender in terms of the conditional release.
You know, just listening to you speak now, I remember yesterday was it that I went onto the foundation's website, and and this is probably a call to all South Africans who are currently watching this to go into the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation's Facebook page, and there's a video that they've posted there where Hollywood actor Morgan Freeman is doing the voiceover on the life of Ahmed Kathrada, and there's a specific clip where former President Nelson Mandela speaks of the courage of Ahmed Kathrada and how Ahmed Kathrada would tell him when he's wrong. He wasn't afraid to do that. Would you say that this is something that you've experienced even back then?
Yes. What I would like to say is, in Robben Island, the type of leadership principles that we were taught was against all odds in terms of when a comrade has committed some certain acts, whether wrong or right, but we were taught to be disciplined. We call it constructive criticism. It is not a destructive criticism where we criticize a comrade by destroying him. And we were taught actually some of these values from the leadership at the B section, that you mustn't be afraid to talk about things in terms of, or to criticize a comrade. Unlike currently, when we are seeing leaders, particularly in the ruling party, that spirit and the values are not much more encouraged in terms of constructive criticisms. People, they took it as personally. One of his legacies, and which was an inspiration to us, was that we should be selfless. when we go outside. And also, we need to be humble, when approaching each and every individual. That is why most of the political prisoners, you'll never see them fighting for positions. That is one of the legacies within the political organism.
Mr. Masemola, just quickly before I let you go, of course we've heard that he has been quite a critical voice even within the movement, the African National Congress. And last year during the 2016 elections, or heading into the 2016 elections, he sent out an email, an open letter to President Jacob Zuma, calling on the president to submit to the will of the people, calling on the president to step down. Although he wasn't happy with the ANC's leadership, he still remained within the party and even campaigned for the party during the elections.
As I said before, that one of the key values that bestowed us in Robben Island, it was in unity, in cohesion, and the element of being constructive. As I said before, constructive criticism. He was correct, because that culture, it was inculcated to us that whenever there is a problem, we should rise above those problems, but in an organized fashion. Remember, Comrade Kathy, he was the one, through the leadership that was sanctioned in Robben Island, in peace section, that he spoke about. We were involved in the underground structures, communication, intelligence, and political education. And then one of those key elements that he taught us, it was organizational discipline. Now, Comrade Kathy issued a statement calling on the president to step down. Well, from the association point of view, we view it, as a constructive criticism, but he was not saying that solemnly in isolation. Well, it was through his right that he should comment on such issues. Well, we never actually condoned him by saying that, because we believe that it was for his ethical right, and also to see things different from what we see. So we believe that his leadership role that he played in the struggle, his ethics, has shaped some of us through the leadership positions, and also many, many, many South Africans here inside the country, that we will miss him a lot. May his soul rest in peace.
Well, thank you so much, and indeed, may his soul rest in peace. But as his soul rests in peace, it will be his legacy that continues to live on. And lots of emphasis through all media houses is that issue around the letter, the open letter that he sent to President Jacob Zuma, calling on the president to step down after the Nene Gate saga, as well as after the Nkandla court case ruling. But as I've mentioned earlier on, is that quite interestingly, is that he had a quite critical voice, quite critical of the current ANC's leadership, but still remained within the party. Some have seen him being with Save SA, where some were saying that should we see struggle veterans being part of an organization that seems to be undermining the ANC, and he remained the part of Save SA, as well as his wife Barbara Hogan as well. And that's something quite interesting about Uncle Kathy, is that although he was quite critical of the ANC, he remained a committed member of the party. And as I mentioned earlier on, we were in the Vaal in Vereniging ahead of the 2016 elections, and he was campaigning with the ANC to make sure that the ANC gets a decisive victory. And of course, as we speak of the legacy of Ahmed Kathrada, one cannot take away his politics. And throughout today, I guess, as we speak to various guests, we'll be speaking around his character within, for instance, the ANC's Integrity Committee, which was established after Mangaung. Remember that he was part of the inaugural members of the Integrity Committee, and whether the Integrity Committee has done what it should have done as per that Mangaung conference as it was established. It's back to you into the studio.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Aldrin Sampear, of course, coming to us live. Then, in the Muslim faith, it's believed that the good deeds that you do during your life will help you to ascend into heaven. In the case of Ahmed Kathrada, one thinks that that would be a given, of course, on the last day. It's called the Day of Judgment. That's when all good souls will ascend to heaven. South Africa mourns and remembers the great Ahmed Kathrada. Alvis?
Yes, thank you, Yeb. And now we're asking you at home, wherever you are, on your phone, talk to us. How do you remember Uncle Kathy? Let's take a look at what you have to say on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. This one coming on the Twitter handle, rest in peace, Ahmed Kathrada, coming from the ANC in Gauteng. We lower our revolutionary banners as we both mourn and celebrate a giant of our times. Rest in peace, Uncle Kathy. From the EFF, farewell, Uncle Kathrada. That one from the same Lozi, rest in revolutionary peace. This one from Musi Maimani, the DA, says, my deep condolences to Ahmed Kathrada, the family, his political party, and the people of South Africa. We have indeed lost a giant. Helen Ziller says, deep condolences, a life of great contribution and personal sacrifice. Rest in peace. This one from the UDM. UDM mourns the loss of the struggle stalwart Ahmed Kathrada. The United Democratic Movement is saddened to hear of his passing. There you have it, 1929 to 2017 this morning. He passed away. Let's now go over to Eben to find out what's happening where one of our reporters, Mzwandile Mbeje, is.
Yeah, thanks, Alvis. Normally, within the funeral processional rites within the Islamic faith, one gets buried on the same day, or normally before sunset on the day of passing. Therefore, it's a little bit extraordinary, the fact that this funeral will take place tomorrow. But let's go over to Mzwandile Mbeje. He's in Harton at the mosque. A very good morning to you, Zwai. Just give us a quick idea. Why do we have the funeral taking place only tomorrow?
Thank you very much, Eben. You know, this is a very important occasion for the country as a whole. Ahmed Kathrada was larger than life, a revolutionary, an activist. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but this is one of those who really contribute immensely to the liberation of this country. And indeed, sadly, he passed away and the country took note. As you know, that he belongs to the Muslim religion. Once a person dies, so he gets buried quickly. Right now, we are at the mosque where this mosque would be used as an overflow area because his flat is not far from here, but obviously people would not be able to go there. I'm sure those that are selected will have the possibility to visit the flat once the body is removed from the hospital, so they would start at this mosque. But even someone who really knows about the Muslim burial issues is the Mufti Zaid Minty. He will tell us what normally happens when someone who is in this religion dies. Welcome to SABC. Please take us through, ordinarily in a Muslim culture, if someone dies, what happens?
Morning, it's a pleasure to be on your platform. Generally, when a Muslim passes on, and as is in our culture and tradition, we follow the rights and regulations as is chalked out in our religion of Islam, and that is that the Muslim body should be buried as soon as possible without any delay. So in so doing, the body should first be washed, and then it is enshrouded in a particular manner, and thereafter the procession should take place for burial as soon as possible.
Do you make exceptions, perhaps, with regards to certain individuals? I'm talking, I know you are not the spokesperson of the Ahmed Kathrada family, but generally, as a rule, are there exceptions that are made, perhaps, when the individual has a certain responsibility in society?
There is no real exceptions. There's a general rule and a rule of thumb that goes for all. But yes, perhaps in the procedure and the manner of how the funeral will be carried out, that will be decided by the family members in particular.
Yeah, I'm basically saying, so what is the time frame?
Like I said, that with time, there is no particular time frame. It should be done without delay, and it should be done as soon as possible.
Because we have heard that it may be within 24 hours. As far as you know, this is still within.
Yes, as long as it's within that, but obviously that is just a guideline, a benchmark to work with. And as I said, that even if it's before the 24, it can be 12 hours, but there should not be any unnecessary delay in the procedure.
Okay. What about the sunset and the sunrise? Do you take those into account?
Not necessary that should hinder or be an impediment in any way.
So you, for example, expect that now we got the news that he passed away in the early hours of this morning. So ordinarily you would expect him to be buried this evening.
Yes, generally it is done in the same day by the evening latest. And again, this will be the decision of the family generally. Like I said, Islamically it should be done as soon as possible. But the family will decide. Sometimes there are other implications and other reasons regulating around this, and perhaps it being part of the state as well. And maybe family members coming from far and abroad, etc., other dignitaries. So for that reason, there will be some delay, which is understood.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again. It was a pleasure to chat with you on this forum.
Thank you. As you've heard there, the Mufti explaining to us what is expected, that as soon as someone dies, he needs to be buried immediately. But indeed, there may be certain factors that may not allow that possibility. So he says, so that can be allowed. So I'm thinking in this situation, at least we would have to know exactly what will happen once that press briefing at 10 is addressed.
Zai, thank you very much for that update. That's Mzwandile Mbeche giving us an update from the mosque in Houghton, of course. We use as part of an overflow area for the funeral of Ahmed Kathrada that passed away early this morning. Now, I can tell you that the funeral procession proceedings will start with a political tribute session at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. That will be followed at 11:30. When final rites will commence at the cemetery. Members of the public and media, you are welcome to attend the funeral ceremony. Of course, that will take place at the West Park Cemetery here in Johannesburg. But tributes continue to pour in, and we're asking you to send your tribute, of course, at SABC Newsroom. We've also got our question: how do you remember the late great Ahmed Kathrada? But let's go over to Alvis now for more.
Find out exactly what you are telling us. Let's take a look once again at the Twitter handle. This one coming from Dali Mpofu. He says, each generation must discover its mission and fulfill it or betray it. Fanon, he quotes Fanon there. Yours was political freedom and you fulfilled it. Ahmed Kathrada. Bantolo Misa tweets, Ahmed Kathrada has died. Our condolences to his family and the ANC. What a humble man he was. He departs, and it cuts off, of course. There's a picture of the former President Nelson Mandela and Ahmed Kathrada. The South African Minister of Sport, Mbalula Fikile, he tweets, Tuantate Ahmed Kathrada, your life was spent in the fight for our freedom. May your soul rest in revolutionary peace. Hashtag rest in peace. Then, of course, that picture there, Advocate Thuli Madonsela tweets, the life of a struggle icon. Ahmed Kathrada is a lesson on significance through selfless service to humanity. Condolences to family and friends. Welcome home, comrades. And there you see Nelson Mandela in heaven, waiting for Ahmed Kathrada, 1929 to 2017. That's Sketchy Bongo with that sketch there, Mangena. Rest in peace, Ahmed Kathrada. These are some of your tweets coming through. You can keep them coming as we continue with this very special program. Remember that we work towards the 10 o'clock deadline for that presser. That'll give us some more details on the funeral. Now, we know it's going to take place at the West Park Cemetery here, Bayes Nodir, tomorrow. But let's find out from Eben what is happening from a little bit later.
Yeah, obviously it's difficult to divorce the life of Ahmed Kathrada from that, of course, of Madiba Nelson Mandela, for those of you watching outside of our borders. In 2009, the late former president, Nelson Mandela, invited all the struggle stalwarts of both the Rivonia and the treason trials. Let's take a listen to Tata Madiba, as he was affectionately known, speaking to our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena.
Tata, can you briefly tell us what was the meeting all about?
Well, it is good, to invite people who have taken a leading role in the struggle for liberation. And we must never give the impression that we have forgotten about the sacrifices that they made. So I invited them, as I have invited quite a lot of them before. You are aware of how I invited freedom fighters from all political organizations in order to thank them for their role. And that is why I've invited them, so that they should not think that they are forgotten, because they played a very important role in the liberation struggle.
Foreign editor Sophie Mokoena at his farm in Polokwane way back then, of course. Now we're asking you that question this morning. How would you remember Uncle Kathy this morning? I want to know from you on the Twitter handle at the SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. There's a question on your screen right there. Let me know. What do you make of him? He passed away this morning and, of course, will be buried tomorrow morning. Details of the funeral will come through in a short while from the presser that will be held. Now, just to give you a background there, it will be held tomorrow, March 29th, commencing at 10 o'clock at the West Park Cemetery here in Beyers Naudé Drive in Johannesburg. Now, you, as a member of the public, you are invited and you're welcome to attend the funeral ceremony. Now, the program will include the political tribute session starting at 10 a.m. that was organized by the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. Former president of South Africa and board member of the Kathrada Foundation, Kgalema Motlanthe, will speak at the event. There's also the anti-apartheid struggle stalwart, Sophie Williams-de Bruyn. Do you remember her? Former Robben Island prisoner, and a family member will also address the mourners. These are some of the details, sketchy details that we have right now. We'll bring you more at 10 o'clock as soon as the press briefing starts to get some more. Now, in a moving tribute to Ahmed Kathrada, struggle veteran Mac Maharaj says that the years of imprisonment on Robben Island also reshaped Kathrada's views and contribution in the new democracy. Well, it seems like let me see if there's a couple more of your tweets coming through, or let's take a look at the picture of the day that comes from Rajesh Jantilal, and it is captioned, "After Nelson Mandela, the second longest serving prisoner, anti-apartheid stalwart. Hashtag Ahmed Kathrada is no more. Hashtag rest in peace Ahmed Kathrada, hambagahle mkonto." Well, there you have it. Our comment of the day comes from Khadija Patel, who says, "When Madiba died, Kathrada said he felt alone. Today, it is us who feel more alone again." Well, there you have it. Let's now take a look at some of the comments coming through. This one from Muli Malong says, "Our heroes are departing one after the other. Who is going to fill their shoes when they've set the bar of morality so high?" Ask Muli. Blessing Chukera says, "Rest in peace, Father. We will always remember you. Ambagahle tata." Michael Jambase Kwave says, "He was a freedom fighter. What is all I know from Buffalo City in East London." Ikona Nazo says, "Once again, the ANC is one man short, an ambassador, a humble servant of the people, an epitome of greatness. We will forever miss you." Charles Gladile says, "A stalwart a revolutionary soldier, an icon, and a freedom fighter. Rest in peace, Uncle Kathy. This one from Isaac says, he taught me that honesty is the first chapter in the book of life. Rest in peace, Uncle Kathy. This one from Aij Nazo again says, a morning of sadness and pain, a sacrifice, contribution not to forget, we are bleeding. Rest in peace, Uncle Kathy. An empathy of greatness. Yaya Kambone says, to Allah is where all we belong. May Allah gives you Jannat Friduas. Inshallah. Amin. Tuma. Amin. Rest in peace, Ahmed Kathrada. We continue this very special tribute until we cross to that live press briefing. Let's now find out from Eben about more history about Ahmed Kathrada.
Yeah, before we get there, it's just a little bit of housekeeping. Of course, we are running a little bit behind schedule this morning. At 10 o'clock, we were supposed to be live at this press conference by the director of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, Nishan Bolton. He was supposed to outline at 10 o'clock what was going to happen in the next 24 hours with regards to the funeral arrangements and procession and, of course, burial rites for Ahmed Kathrada. But we're still waiting for them to get ready. Meanwhile, Ahmed Kathrada spent 18 years of his imprisonment on Robben Island. After his release, he stayed involved in the activities around the prison when it became a museum. He served as the head of Ex-Political Prisoners Committee, the chairman of the Robben Island Museum, and the chairperson of the Robben Island Museum Council. Now, throughout the years, he led over 300 tours and delegations to the island, including heads of state, celebrities and ordinary South Africans, many of them children.
When we came here, we were the enforced guests of Verwoerd. Then we were the enforced guests of Foster, then Botha, then de Klerk. And now we are the voluntary guests of President Mandela.
The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa.
Racial discrimination on Robben Island, as in the whole of South Africa, was categorized. On top of the ladder are whites with the franchise and all privileges. Immediately under were coloreds and Indians with laws that applied to them, but they couldn't vote either. And at the bottom of the ladder were the Africans. So I explained in detail how this discrimination worked in prison. For instance, just one example, or two examples. Mr. Mandela and African prisoners, when we landed there, had to wear short trousers. I was given long trousers because I'm an Indian.
could not be brought out unless there was a warder with a gun training on us. And they, after being locked up, they used to bring warders from other prisons just to have a look at these people through the window.
Marshals of the National Reception Committee trying to get the people, and a salute from Mr. Nelson Mandela, his wife Winnie, greeting the people outside the fences of the Victor Verster prison. That is the man who the world has been waiting to see.
Now that we have won the struggle for democracy, the importance of Robben Island continues. It's a continuous thing. It was important in the past, it remains important in the future, because it does symbolize the victory of the forces of democracy over injustice. And it follows logically on the solidarity that the international community showed towards not only prisoners of Robben Island, but through Robben Island, their solidarity with the struggle of all the people of South Africa. And this is a continuous, logical continuation of that solidarity when UNESCO decided that this should be declared a World Heritage Site. With freedom comes responsibility, particularly among young people. Responsibility to themselves, to their parents, to their country. The responsibility is today all avenues that were closed to them before are open. Our country needs expertise, skills in every direction. And today institutions that were closed to us before are open. So our wish is to take full advantage of everything that was closed before, so that you can serve, repeat, yourselves, your parents, and your country.
A very good morning to you. If you're just tuning in and waking up, you're waking up to the sad news of the loss of struggle icon Ahmed Kathrada, who died this morning at about 4:45 at the Wits Donald Gordon Medical Center here in Johannesburg. And throughout the day, we'll be sharing memories of him and hearing words from people who are remembering him. And you've had an opportunity, of course, to share your thoughts on our Twitter feed. But sometimes the best way to get inside a person's mind and his being is to hear his own words. And just a couple of quotes from Ahmed Kathrada himself, and perhaps one poignant one at this time. He says, "In death, you once more challenge people from every strata, religion, and position to think about how their own actions do and can change the world for better or worse." He also said, hatred, revenge, bitterness, these are negative emotions. The person harboring those emotions suffers more. And perhaps one, I think, that we all can relate with, he says, the hardest thing to open is a closed mind. And one of the things that we've been hearing throughout the course of this broadcast today, and certainly messages on Twitter, is just how selfless this man was. In fact, a little bit earlier on, we heard from Dennis Goldberg, one of the surviving Rivonia trialists, who was in tears, remembering his friend and his lifelong comrade, sharing his memories of him. This man who was born in Schweizer Reneke many, many years ago. A very good morning to all of our viewers who are watching on SABC2 now. You're just joining us for special coverage on the passing of struggle stalwart Ahmed Kathrada, who died this morning here in Johannesburg. And we've been hearing from friends, family and fellow comrades who've been sharing their thoughts. And we hope to hear from you as well on our Twitter feed. My colleagues have been sharing those messages with you. In a short while, we're hoping to get to the Nelson Mandela Foundation to find out a little bit more detail about a planned ceremony a funeral ceremony that's taking place tomorrow. And Eben, you're going to tell us a little bit more about that. It's all going to be under Muslim rites, I'm told, but something fairly unusual because he's going to be buried tomorrow. All right. So as I was...
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Of course, funeral arrangements, for those of you, if you've just joined us, very good morning to our viewers on SABC2. Of course, 10 a.m. tomorrow morning is when the funeral procession will get underway. There'll be a political tribute session followed, of course, by the procession that commences at 11:30. Tributes have been pouring in from all over. Let's have a look at some of the tweets that you guys are sending us in. As you remember, the late, great Ahmed Kathrada passed away, of course, in the early hours of this morning. This one from Ramzar Mokhali, who says, a newsroom, the hardest thing to open is a closed mind. Yes, that's a famous Ahmed Kathrada quote. Of course, that one from Ramzar Mokhali. This one from Trevor, who says, rest in peace, strong stalwart. South Africa has lost another father figure. This one from Gozimas, who says, I am politically free today because you sacrificed your own life and freedom for me, and for that I am forever thankful. Well, let's go over to the Nelson Mandela Foundation for Memory in Harton for today's proceedings.
وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وأنثانا اللهم من أحييته منا فأحيه على الإسلام ومن توفيته منا فتوفه على الإيمان. O my Lord, my graceful, kind, forgiving, merciful, loving Lord, have compassionate on this beautiful soul in a manner that he had compassion, forgiveness, goodness in his life. He was a model for every generation. Let his life lessons be a lesson for one and all. Have mercy on him, compassionate on him, love him, elevate him in the highest of stages, in the highest of honors. You are the most merciful, you are the most kind. Make it easy for those who he has left behind. Make it easy for all of us. Let it not be a test. Rather, let it be a lesson that we need to be better in our manners, in our character, in everything that we do, in everything that we say. We remember him for the beautiful soul that he was. Oh my Lord, you remember him. You let it be that every generation that is to come remembers him for the person that he was. Have mercy, love, and compassion, and special kindness and goodness towards him. You share this with him, O my Lord. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين.
In 1929, Ahmed Kathrada was born into an Indian family in Schweizer-Reneke, where apartheid was the law of the land. At a young age, Kathy joined the struggle for liberation, risking his freedom for the rights for all South Africans. He ultimately faced the death penalty alongside Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu.
Kathy has been in every major political trial until he landed in jail in the Rivonia trial. 1946, 1950, 1952, 1956 treason trial, you name it, every national trial Kathy has been involved.
They were sentenced to life in prison and were sent to Robben Island. People the world over called for their release.
It was a microcosm of how apartheid applied in South Africa. I stayed in the cell for 17.5 years. If you stood here and looked out, not only can you see Cape Town, which is quite a distance, but the warders going to the harbor with their kids, that was the advantage of the cell. The main deprivation was children. You miss children. Mr. Mandela saw his two little girls when they were 2 and 3. And next time he saw them was when they were over 16. A prisoner never loses hope. Never, ever. Although we were sentenced to life imprisonment, and for political prisoners, life meant life. We want Robben Island to be a monument. One wants to perpetuate the positive aspects, and that is a place of triumph. Because Robben Island played a very important role in the struggle, although we were in prison. And the struggle to crush apartheid was in some ways less difficult than the struggle we are facing now.
After 26 years, Kathy and his comrades walked free, infusing the struggle with new hope.
I had waited long, and we met again. It was a moving experience, and became very clear that nowhere in the world the human spirit can be destroyed by a tyrant or an oppressor.
6 months later, Nelson Mandela was also a free man. They negotiated an end to apartheid and set to work building a new nation. Prisoner Mandela became President Mandela. With Kathrada as his advisor, they chose a path of truth and reconciliation over revenge. Old comrades worked with the young leaders to make their highest ideals the law of the land. Kathy taught people in South Africa and around the world about the history, triumphs and lessons of the journey to freedom. He is a vigilant champion of ethical standards and of racial equality.
He has been a great instrument of the movement. That is what he has brought. Confidence in the future.
I found him to be a great fountain of wisdom.
He is a selfless person. He's made an enormous contribution.
You know, he connects to the issues that affect us as ordinary human beings.
He has contributed significantly to our rainbow nation.
Ahmed Kathrada remained core part of the leadership of our struggle at the time.
Freedom to be achieved has to be fought for, has to be sacrificed. There has to be sacrifices. Freedom you don't get on a platter. Nobody has given freedom on a platter to anybody. It has to be fought for.
They had passion for what they were doing. They didn't do it for name and fame.
South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white.
They were very brave.
to make the kind of sacrifices that they made.
We are deeply grateful that today we live in a lively democracy.
But he's so warm and he's so humble for a person of his status and his legacy.
But you'd expect someone of his stature to actually be proud and, he'd want to be praised, but that is not who he is.
He's basically teaching us about non-racialism. It's an incredibly good heart in Kathy that I think most people recognize and respond to. And, that is a privilege to live with someone with such a good heart.
His life is a legacy of an ongoing example of the unbeatable power of love and the triumph of the human spirit.
Good morning once again. Thank you again for joining us on this difficult morning. We are here with all of our hearts on the floor. We are saddened by the news today, and while we all recognize what a great loss we're experiencing, we must also realize that we have to celebrate the results of such a great, great life. As a young person in South Africa, I stand here before you completely grateful for the life that was Mr. Ahmed Kathrada. I'd like to personally send my condolences to his family and to everybody here today and to everybody around the world. It's a loss for every one of us. To start off the program officially, I'd like to please call the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Mr. Sello Hatang.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. K would have been disappointed with your your clap to Lunga. I think you can do better than that. For Lunga to say that she's here as a young person, as a beneficiary, is important because it's because of the struggles of people like Mr. K that Lunga is able to stand here today. And I think as we celebrate Mr. K and as I welcome you, I want to remind you that today is not about being sad. It's actually a day to celebrate a life well lived. Mr. K lived his life to the fullest. He was a fighter to the very end. And to welcome you, I thought I should share an anecdote. An anecdote of something that happened, I think it was a year, maybe 2 years ago. I was at the French ambassador's home when he was with his fellow Rivonia trialists, Ntate Mlangeni and Ntate Goldberg. And the two of them were already there when Mr. K walked in. And he walked in as if to brag that he was not carrying a walking stick. And the other two were, Ntate Mlangeni at the time had just come out of hospital and was on a wheelchair. And Mr. K walked in, and earlier on I was sitting with the other two, and the two were now sharing about the pains and aches. So Mr. K arrives, and the story continues. Hey, Kathy, how are you? He says, no, I'm good, I'm good. And they start telling him all over again. So I've just come out of hospital. They've just fixed this thing, and that one has just fixed that. And so they check in with him. And you, how are you? He says, no, I'm good. In fact, I just did 5 kilometers, a 5-kilometer walk. I think he was bragging there, if you ask me. But that brag was important, because it was saying to them, it doesn't matter whether you complain about your aches and pains, you must continue. So I asked them, if you have these aches and pains, with your advanced age, surely you should now be leaving it to us, that we should run for you. And I think it's true to say that all three of them turned to me and said, well, for as long as God has given us this precious life, we will continue to run. And I asked them, why would you be involved in committees when we should be running for you? And again, it's true that they then said that, again, for all three of them, for them it meant that they will run until God takes life out of them. So my message to you today as I welcome you is to say that Mr. K is no more. That life that we knew is no more, but he will always be. So for us to become who we need to become, we need to just remember to celebrate that life, knowing that we don't reminisce about his past as if he's gone. But it's a Mr. K who live with those who are still to be born. And that those next generations can only celebrate him if we make the struggle real, that we deliver on education. Sean was telling us this morning about the militant Mr. K who went with us to the Feast Must Fall meeting at Vets. Again, that was a Mr. K who was already really walking slowly but saying, these young people need to know that we haven't delivered. And I'm here to tell them they must fight on so that the rest of us can deliver. So the expectation on us is that we'll deliver on education, we'll care for the vulnerable in our society, particularly women and children, that the elderly must be looked after, but that we cannot do so if we don't remember the struggles that the likes of Mr. K put for us to be where we are. So those are my few words as I welcome all of you to the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Mr. K helped establish this very foundation. And for us, he was a proud member of the board until last year. And I'd like to pay a special tribute and thanks to Mayor Winnie Mandela, who's here. Thank you very much for coming through. I saw her yesterday. We were together at the hospital with Mr. K, and it was a sight that one didn't want to see. That's why I resisted for a long time to go and see Mr. K, because I wanted to have the memory of Mr. K, who was still doing 5 kilometers. And thank you very much for your continued support. Osenani, thank you so much again for being here. Marin Menel, one of our trustees, thank you very much for being here. Tate Hanikom. Sean, we are here to support you. And may you convey to Mebabra that her loss is not only hers. We join in that loss because South Africa has lost one of the greatest of its time. But that with his death, we will make sure that we continue fighting the good fight to help build a country of their dreams, but the country of those who are still to be born, that they might find it. Tate George Bezos, thank you very much for coming through. Prof, Tate Mula, thank you so much for coming through. And to all the veterans here present, the ambassadors here present, the Indian High Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for coming through. The actors of Isidingo, as you know that Mr. K would be traveling wherever in the world, and he will demand that it be recorded for him, and to see the actors of Isidingo here, to pay their respects, we thank you. So with those few words, welcome to the Nelson Mandela Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Hatang. If I could please call Mr. Nishan Bolton, who's the CEO of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation.
Thank you very much, and for that applause in advance. Respected elders, friends, colleagues, comrades of Uncle Kathy, we celebrate 75 years of activism. Kathrada started his life as an activist at the age of 12. And up until the end, I would describe him as still as being an activist. I first met him when he came out of jail, the very first day, the 15th of October 1989. Unfortunately for me, the day before that, we had a huge activist forum in Lens to prepare for his homecoming. And I got assigned to then be the security come driver. And I thought it was going to be a short while. But that continued for almost 4 to 5 years, up until the '94 elections, and finally driving him to Cape Town to make sure that he's at Parliament and I could then leave him. Only to discover about 10 years ago, discussions around the establishment of a Kathrada Foundation started. And slowly his magnetism dragged me out of my job in the public sector to head up his foundation. It's been a privilege. It's been a privilege working with him since the day of his release. Uncle Kathy came out of jail finding it a completely new world, but very quickly adapting. When he went into prison, he was already a skilled typist, so to master the computer was no major exercise for him. His very first speech at FNB, he wrote himself on his computer. We cannot find that computer anywhere, but at least we have the audio recording of the speech. But he wasn't. He started to drive, and eventually wanted to drive on his own to Joburg. And one day came back drenched, completely drenched, him and all the fellow passengers. And I said, why didn't you guys roll up the window? He said, no, man, we couldn't find this winder thing that you wind up the window. Because this was by now automatic windows, you press a button and it goes up. And I had forgotten to tell him about those things. But over time, he became a master of technology. It wasn't on Facebook and Twitter, but Skype, he would be in conversations on Skype across the world with friends and family. This activism that we talk about is, we've now got from the last few years from the police services and the Department of Justice about 10,000 pages of declassified documents on Kathrada. And they consist mainly of police recordings of various meetings where he had spoken, so verbatim transcripts. I'm not going to read some of it here, but I can say that his militancy would make Julius look tame. When we release these documents at some point, you will see what I'm talking about. Militant to the core. But that militancy was disciplined. When it came to the point of needing to understand that negotiations was the route, he was persuaded, and that's what he then devoted his life to. Reconciliation and negotiations. But fundamentally, to Uncle Kathy are two things. Is the sense of activism, but living his life as well as working towards a non-racial society. Now, he loves this quotation from, I forget, Bernard Shaw or others, and when Bernard Shaw was asked, well, how do you solve the race problem in South Africa? Bernard Shaw says, well, let them marry each other. So marry them and then we don't have a problem. And he did precisely that. His relationship before he went to jail was with Sylvia Neem. Coming out of jail, his partner and wife, Barbara Hogan. And his personal relationship spanned the color line. He said to me it also spanned the religious line. I didn't get too much of the details, but I was hoping to do that at some point. His illness caught us by surprise. He had just completed had been at the event at Victor Verster to mark Madiba's release. It was something that he was very passionate about over the last few years. You know, he did all kinds of walks, the 702 walk, the Gandhi walk, the Constitutional Hill walk, as well as this, because it was his way of showing and demonstrating support for these things. But after that walk, he then was the first signs of his illness. So he spent, I think, 2 days at a hospital in Cape Town. But I think he had a foreboding that he needed to come home. So he insisted to Barbara, he wants to get home and he wants to go to his flat. So he got home mid-February and was really in bed for the better part of February. And treatment and all kinds of things. And we thought he was fine, recovering very well. until at a point when dehydration set in and he had to now go back, and he went into Donald Gordon. And that's the first time that the doctors did the scan, and they picked up severe blood clotting on the brain, extensively all across the left-hand side. That required surgery. But the one thing about Comrade Kathy, even in that situation, he wanted to consult. So we're sitting there and he says, I have to do this operation, but get me so and so. And at least about 10 odd people had to be brought because he had to consult with them. I said, look, do we have to fill FNB Stadium as well? So that you can consult the entire country. But even that decision, the major decisions of his life, would be done in consultation at some point with Walter Sisulu, with Madiba, and in his release with all kinds of people. There was very little that he would do without consulting first. When the Landmed Hospital wanted to name the hospital after him, he did a whole process of consultation within the foundation and everywhere else, and then eventually agreed on what they were trying to do. So that was something deeply entrenched into him. Many people were asking me in the last few days, what's his financial status? I can say up front, he didn't serve on any boards, he had no major shares in any particular company, and he declined much of those positions. He declined every board position, simply saying that because he could not add value to corporate world, we would not take it on. Many others would have done differently. So his illness, once the pneumonia set in the last 48 hours or 52 hours, the doctors then advised that his condition was deteriorating. But let me just share two things. Immediately after his operation, he was conscious. I went to see him, and in his soft way, the first thing he asked me is, what is the headlines in the Sunday Times newspapers, or all the Sunday papers? Because it's a tradition to read every paper, and there was deep desire to know what was going on. Obviously, the headlines that weekend was social development and the chaos and the mass in social development. I could not tell him about those things. So I changed the subject to other stuff. He then, before I left, started singing some of his own Afrikaans liedjies. For the last few years, we've had to download Sari Mare and all kinds of things because that was the tunes that he had grown up with. And every morning would play it full blast in the flat, I think until Barbara complained, so it toned down. But that was his life, was a deep appreciation for a wide variety of culture. This morning at 4:45, he passed away. But that was after having had the bulk of his family visiting him yesterday, as well as many of his friends and political comrades. Others were making arrangements to come this morning, but they would not have had that opportunity. I think Auntie Sophie was there, Derek, Mawini, the Premier, and many others were there just to say their farewells. In his last few years in the foundation, Ahmed Kathrada has had a public life of over 200 public engagements a year, sometimes even more than that. And I thought this was strange until I started going through his diaries, or Rash and others were going through his diaries from 1990, and it was the same pace. His police records indicate in the 50s and early 60s is the same pace of activism. And that's really what continued throughout this period. His last message, audible message to the doctors on Human Rights Day, they were trying to put the drip back into him. And he fought it off. And the doctors say very clearly they heard him saying, I know my rights. Don't put this in. And they accepted, Human Rights Day, we can't do this to him. We'll do it as soon as he is a bit more at ease with this. So that's the richness of Castrada's life. I mean, we don't have the whole day to really talk to you about every aspect that I would really like to share with you. The funeral arrangements are as follows. It will be a Muslim funeral. It was his expressed wish to have a Muslim funeral. It was also his expressed wish not to be put on life support. He had made it very clear that if it comes to that situation, please don't put me on a life support system, a ventilator. I want to go in the most dignified way possible. That was his expressed wish, and we carried that out. The funeral will be at West Park Cemetery at 10 o'clock. It will be preceded by a public tribute program organized and managed and hosted by the Kathrada Foundation, addressed by many of the members of the foundation. The main address will be by the former President, Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe, will be chaired by Derek Hanekom, the chair of the board of the foundation. And then there will be other tributes from various other sectors there. It will be an interfaith service, culminating in a Muslim prayer and a Muslim burial. I think that's about what we can share at this point in time. Condolence books will be available at the Mandela Foundation, the Kathrada Foundation, the Office of the Premier, and other sites in the next day or so. I think just to conclude, Sello was right. The sense of social justice, unfinished work, places a huge responsibility on all of us. And we would be failing him and his generation if we don't stop the rot that is setting in today. Thank you very much.
Before we allow a few people to come up and give tributes and share their memories with Uncle Kathy, I'd like to call on Mayor Irene Manel, who serves on the Nelson Mandela Foundation board.
Let me please join Sello in thanking you all so much for being here on this day of, in a sense, celebration and, of course, sadness. Death is always like an amputation for those who are left behind. You keep reaching for the missing part, and it's simply not there. But Kathy will always be with us, the extraordinary man that he was, the man who was feisty and tough, and as Sean has said, an activist of deep, deep commitment and deep anger and deep capacity to express that anger in a way that really impacted so many people. He was a very remarkable man. I feel so privileged to have served on this board with him for the few years that we had together. I didn't know him as well as most of you, but I knew him well enough to value the extraordinary soul that he was, the kindness, the empathy. One of the very, very few people who wrote in a way that made those of us from outside and from a different kind of life understand how that extraordinary survival, that moral survival that came out of Robben Island those many, many, many years, he was one of the few people to express it in a way that became understandable. I think what we are left with is this wonderful memory of an extraordinary man whose commitment to the values that we all share and all dream of seeing more accepted in this very, very turbulent world, not just here, but everywhere on this extraordinary globe, this wonderful and horrible globe of ours. The greatest tribute that we can give to the memory of Kathy is to continue to value his extraordinary commitment to the very, very, very best human values, and to not just passively remember and value and praise, but to become activists or to continue to be activists in the strongest possible way to preserve or to retain to the best of our capacity, those values in the lives of everybody, every one of us in this country and in this world. Thank you for being here. Continue to treasure what Kathy meant to all of us and continue to fight for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. We're going to have a few people just share some memories with us, as I mentioned before. And of the people I call up, if you feel more comfortable speaking from your seat, please let me know. I'll bring a microphone to you. But similarly, just a word to the media, kindly stay where you are right now and allow people to speak freely wherever they're speaking from. The first of which we're going to ask to share some memories with us is Mamwini. Will you be coming up or should I come to you? Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, so Mamwini has advised that we please call Her Excellency Mam Zenani Mandela.
Good morning, everybody. We are gathered here to celebrate the life of one of the most special men of the 20th and 21st century. Because his life truly matters, especially to those of us who appreciate the role that Uncle Kathy played in the fight for our freedom. Because it was a fight. Let no one ever tell you otherwise. Why else would he and others who took up the cause of our freedom have been so brutally locked up? Yes, for all his gentleness, Uncle Kathy was there in the trenches because he was ever reliable, ever diligent, always committed. There are those people who come into your life and never leave because they are truly special. They have what we like to call presence, that rare ability to loom large in our lives so that their impact on us is multiplied 1,000 times over. Uncle Kathy belongs in this unique group. Let me state my regard for him in this way so that it is clear just how highly me and my family regarded him. He was my other father. I have only the fondest memories of him. Ever gentle, always self-effacing, but undoubtedly powerful. For many decades, he was one of my father's closest friends. At this crucial time in our country, it should be clear to all of us that we have to keep his and Tata's legacy alive through all of us. Let us honor what he and my father stood for, by ensuring that their ideals remain a tangible part of this country's reality. For let us speak the truth today. Uncle Kathy is the last of a generation of men and women who fought so valiantly for the liberation of our country and still managed to practice what they preached, to walk the talk, which we now grasp is no easy task. So I call on each and every one of us to never forget the sacrifices they made for this country. For me, it is important to point out that Uncle Kathy was my best friend, brother, and confidant. I arranged for him to spend time with my dad during those final days. I love watching the two of them share jokes, reminiscing about the past, and it is one of my life's most abiding memories. Perhaps the real treasure of any man or woman's life isn't what they mean to their immediate family, but rather how many outsiders consider them flesh and blood. For Uncle Kathy, as it is for my father, it is abundantly clear that millions of South Africans consider them as relatives of the first order. And that, for me, mirrors so eloquently their very special political achievement. May our prayers be heeded for the special son of the soil. I thank you.
Thank you for those words to Her Royal Highness Mandela Dlamini. She's right when she says we all consider this group of people first family members. We recognize completely their impact, and we're very grateful to have had them be the people contribute to the world that we find ourselves in today. Up next, I'd like to please call Ntate Makura. No? All right, not a problem. We are also joined by Ms. Sophie de Bruyn. Would you like to come up and share a few words with us?
Good morning, everybody. On Tuesday, I think it was on Tuesday, we gathered at Lily's Leaf for an interfaith prayer meeting for Ahmed Kathrada. And we never knew that we were going to stand here this morning, gathering here, speaking about him in the past tense. Kathy always used to say when something like this happens, that there are two things that we cannot avoid. The one is old age, and the other one is death. I stand here this morning to say a few words in memory of Kathy and how I knew him. That I first met him many years ago in the early 50s when I came from Port Elizabeth to Johannesburg under the Federation of SACTU, or the South African Congress of Trade Unions. We used to commute in those days to Johannesburg, Durban, back to Port Elizabeth doing our trade union work. And it was at a party that I met Kathy at the end of one of the conferences where I met him for the first time. And we've remained friends for all that time, friends and comrades. And I must say, all the attributes and the qualities that were spoken about him every time, his qualities of commitment was already showing in those days. Commitment for hard work and for respect and for honesty. And I remember that he mentored us. We were younger than him. When I say we, some of the comrades are here this morning. Comrade Mosey is here that I've seen. I'm not sure if I've seen others like Comrade Abdullah Jassad and Comrade, the other comrades are not around anymore. But there are a lot of comrades that he mentored and guided. And he groomed us. And as much as Comrade Kathy was younger than the older stalwarts like Yusuf Dadu and Molvika Chalia and the Montenaikers, Dr. Montenaiker, and all the giants of that time. Comrade Cathy being young amongst them, younger, he was always respected in their company, and they always listened to him. I also remember him for his kindness and for trying to get together the colored people in organizing us. The younger ones, he was very passionate about the Colored Congress. The Colored Congress was a weak Congress, but he tried his best with us to build the Colored Congress, and always asked that the colored youth should work together with the Indian Youth Congress. And those are some of the things that I remember, but also his kindness. And when I say his kindness, I mean that I was the Colored Congress organizer. And it was very hard because Colored Congress did not have any money. And so in African National Congress also didn't have any money. But we worked together, and we were based in West, Corner West, and Market Street, in a basement that was given to the Indian Congress to do their operations from there. But the Indian Congress took us, the African National Congress and the Colored Congress, together into that basement. The Congress of Democrats had their own offices in town, in Johannesburg, and I had a little corner in the basement hall where I worked from, and late Comrade Thomas and Kobe had another corner with a desk where he worked from. And it was always the Indian Congress that assisted us financially and with everything else. And the kindness that I speak about is that because we didn't have funds in those days, things were very difficult. There was hardly anything that you got in as far as even a stipend. And if you got a stipend, it was very erratically. And I didn't know that Comrade Cathy was watching this, of me not eating or not having lunch. And quietly he arranged with Comrade Helen Joseph, who was the secretary of the garment, the white garment industry. And they had a canteen downtown. And he arranged with Stanley Lollen, who was the secretary of the Colored Congress, and between them they arranged that when the garment workers, the staff of the Medical Aid Society would have their lunch in this canteen, the auntie that cooked there would keep a plate of food for me so that I can at least have a staple meal for the day. And this is what he did. This was the arrangement that was made by him. And so I would walk from West Street right up, I think it was End Street, something like that, End Street. And there I would stand and wait for my lunch. If I see that the white staff is still busy, the auntie would say, show me that I must still wait. And when they have all left the room, then I have to go in and have my lunch there. That was a kindness that I know about Cathy. The other kindness that I want to also speak about was after I came from Port Elizabeth and I was situated in the offices in this basement that I'm talking about at my desk, and it was going to be the Christmas holidays. And Cathy came in and he looked at me and he said to me, but why is your face so long? What is wrong? And I didn't answer. And then he asked me again, is anything wrong? And at that point, I just burst out crying. And he asked me, why are you crying? And I said I was crying because I won't be able to go home for Christmas. And he looked at me, and he called late Babla Salucci, and I don't know who else he called. And they went and had a short discussion. And later on he came back and he said, yeah, some money. Go and buy yourself a ticket and go home for your holidays. The kind of qualities that he had, qualities of kindness, integrity, hard work, commitment, always striving to see that us young ones, reminding us of our chores, whatever it was. It was at his flat at Colbert House, 13 Colbert House, where we would gather in the evening, if Mosey can remember, with our buckets of paint, going to the road in the dark of night to paint on the bridges of Johannesburg, whatever slogans we were told to paint there. And we would get back in the dead of night or early morning back to his flat. And I feel that Colbert House number 13 hasn't been given any prominence because that was a flat, Colbert House building, 3rd floor, number 13, where all the important discussions took place, most of it. Monty Naiker, Dr. Dadu, sometimes Chief Latuli, would come to Johannesburg in the afternoon or late afternoon, and they would go to number 13 Colbert House and discuss and deliberate. And then they would cross over from Colbert House to Market Street, round the corner from Colbert House. And there in the basement, the other comrades would have gathered, and there they would take the decisions that they have discussed upstairs at number 13 Colbert House. So those are some of the things that I remember. The work that he was involved in, his greatness, his respect. But he was also a very measured person and very discreet. That is what he was. But out of all of that, he was also a jolly person. He tried to learn to dance, and he had 2 left feet. And he also liked a party, but a private party, not a great party. And Kathy's kindness went right out to all of us younger ones. There was a Dr. Abu, and they owned a cinema in Fortsburg. And Kathy would organize for tickets without us knowing, because the cinema belonged to the doctor's family. And he would say to us, here are tickets. A whole 2 rows would be reserved for us. And he had many connections. Everybody loved him. And we will remember all his qualities of hard work and integrity and commitment and dedication. And the popular thing that goes around now, which says he wasn't afraid to speak to power. He was like that from his young days, not mincing his words with anything that he didn't approve of. If he didn't like it, even if you were a grown-up or an older person, he would say it to you, but he would say it with respect. And I think as we are gathered here this morning, we should go away with the memories, all these very good memories, the way we know him, the way we have brushed shoulders with him, the way we've loved him and the way he loved us. And I want to say, to Barbara, to Barbara and the family, which I've already passed our family's condolences to them. I would like to say to them that they mustn't mourn, but they must remember Kathy's life. Keep those good memories of him and remember him in that way. Kathy was a person that loved young people, and he spoke many times to the young people that they must inculcate his life, because the young people are facing a very difficult time. Our country is facing a very difficult time. But it is the young people who are the future generation that will have to be put up with what is happening today in our country. And it is them that are going to have to fight another struggle. But I think we and Kathy will be happy in the knowledge that what that generation have worked for, strived for, died for, has not been in vain. Because already we can see the results of that, what they strove for. In the education that the young people has taken upon themselves, and their choices that they are making. And we are very proud and happy. And sometimes I get a lump in my throat from happiness just to experience when I'm around them how gifted and talented they are. And that is what we want from them. And we can be happy to know that the struggle that they are going to have to fight, they are going to be more equipped, more educated, because they are going to fight it digitally. The kind of resources that we didn't have. And because they are going to be doing it much smarter. Thank you very much.
No, it's fine. You can keep it. Thank you very much. Everyone here has talked of traits and parts of Mr. K's personality that we ought to all treasure and try our best to emulate. And those deserve celebration. And we are here in part to mourn, but definitely to celebrate a life dedicated to purpose. So just to bring our spirits up a little bit, we're going to have one more item from the Soweto Gospel Choir. You guys ready?
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. lights before. Sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. If you ever needed the lights before, sure you need it now. We need it every day and every hour. In the morning, 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 in the day, in the day, in the evening, in the evening, in the evening, and when my hustle rise, in the morning, 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 in the day, in the day, in the evening, in the evening, oh glory, yeah.
Thank you very much. The next few messages from people who are going to speak to us, I'd like to request are be brief. We'd like to close, or rather wrap up the official part of the program and allow everybody else here to perhaps say something from their heart as well. So briefly, Ntate Bizos, I'm going to bring the mic to you as you requested.
Thank you. As I have already spoken, I will be very brief. Kathy was probably the smartest accused and the smartest prisoner that the regime had to deal with. He would not dissociate himself from the other accused in the Rivamia trial. He refused to point out anything done by any of the other accused. And the prosecutor tried very hard to actually get him on their side. He definitely rejected it, and he was one of the smartest clients that Bernard Berger, one of my seniors, that actually paid special attention to his trial. He managed to get him out of 4 counts, but he couldn't get him out for the 2 counts. And I have already said, but for the benefit of those who came a little late, he is the one who actually told the prosecutor the no unturned certain terms. Don't expect me to say anything that will help you get a conviction against my comrades. Finish your clock. He was also, after his release, at the end of '89, very caring in reporting to the people that were left behind, and more particularly to Mawini, because Nelson Mandela, when the others were free, he said, as I have said long ago, I want to be the last political prisoner that is...
All of us in South Africa. It's another giant of our democracy, of our freedom, who has departed. And we all feel so hugely deprived of this man who sacrificed so much, who gave so much. He was in prison for 26 years and he was only free for 27 years. And for this, we see a person's life which was just dedicated to making sure that our people are free, making sure that we have this democracy. And he's one of those who, out of sheer total commitment, selfless commitment, gave his life to the freedom of our people. A man of great integrity, a humble person, a person who was honest to his core, who wanted our freedom to be based on great values, values of great integrity, great honesty, and a person who lived his life by the words that he always articulated. And he always put our people first. So today we are in great sadness, but we also celebrate a great life. And we will always remember Uncle Kathy. He's leaving a great legacy, a legacy that we will try to emulate. We will try to emulate his commitment, his example. And I particularly remember him for the great fondness that he had for young people. And it is the young people of our country who must remember Uncle Kathy and try to walk in his footsteps. So we look forward to paying greater tribute to him at the funeral and also at the memorial.
Mr. Deputy President, you've just met Barbara Hogan, his wife. In what state is she right now?
Well, Barbara Hogan, his partner, is sad. Naturally, she loved him so much, and she's filled with deep sadness. But at the same time, she's being comforted by many people who are coming to pay their respects and their tribute to Uncle Kathy. So she is being comforted in a very wonderful way. But she is sad because this is a terrible loss to her as well.
Deputy President, Uncle Kathy, obviously, as many people affectionately know him.
Comrades and friends, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words. Kathy and I lived in Colvard House. He was on the third floor, I was on the first floor. But we became co-accused in the first treason trial, 1956 to 61. I want to just give you a few anecdotes about Kathy. He had a good sense of humor. Once we were putting up posters, and the posters were being put up by what is known as the Picasso Club. We had one poster left, and we passed the old Van Willert Street headquarters of the Special Branch. So Kathy dared Babla Saluji, the late Babla Saluji, who was thrown down the building, who was tortured, and said, "I dare you to put up this posters." So he said, "No, I'll do it." He put up the posters. Now we, like idiots, decided to take a turn to come and check whether the poster is still there. You know? And the police immediately gave chase. And we happened, and they cornered us at the old Coliseum. And there, the policeman that was chasing us looked at the number plate, the registration card, and he said, "Whose car is that?" So Kathy got up and said, "It's mine." He says, God, a G van Schweizer Renneke. He says, yes. He said, now listen, you chaps. You go ahead, put up your posters, but don't put them up on public buildings. And that was the first time that the Picasso Club was able to distribute the posters without looking over their shoulders whether the police are coming at all or not. We were co-accused in the treason trial. And at Pretoria Central, every morning...
The life and contribution of Comrade Cathy, I think more importantly, he left with the same resilience and dignity that he lived. My personal contact goes back to 1985 when I was detained in solitary and I was held in Portsmouth. And he slipped past my cell, said hello to me, asked me to be strong on his way to the hospital, and then the following day sent me a poem. So it's a long relationship that now spans 32 years. But when I speak to many of the people around, his old friends and comrades, that 32-year relationship is short. But I think he treated everybody in quite the same way, with dignity and strength. And he's been a particular pillar of strength. Some of the stories that he's been able to recount through life, just sitting and sharing information, sharing values very importantly, and that I think is a big struggle for us. It's not the political struggle, it's a struggle for values, and I think Uncle Cathy represented that in large doses. And so it's that we'll miss. It's a generation of leadership, of people who took responsibility and struggle not for position, but in order to impact on the lives of others. And so in mourning his passing, I think we mourn the coming to an end of that generation, because there are still others around. There are few, the other two Rivonia trialists. There are people like Mac Maharaj of the second generation, Lalu Chiba, but the numbers are becoming fewer and fewer, but the battle for values is becoming greater, because the sideshow of money and the feeding trough is becoming too big. And so we need to replicate those skills and the strength and the resilience and the voice of people who will say no to that and understand what Batupili means. It means always putting our people first. It means tilting our policies in the direction of our people and being committed to have our policies measured against the objectives that we set. And that's what I think Uncle Cathy represents to all South Africans. It's strong, it's resilient, it's non-racial, it's non-sexist, it's driven by the best values amongst us. And so I think we dip our banner and say thank you very much for the inspiration, the leadership and the example, the living example that Ahmed Kathrada was to each one of us.
Mr. Manuel, what a page from the leadership of Mr. Kathrada that not only young South Africans but leaders of today can take out of that book of life of him.
You know, I think that there'd be a few of these things. One of them is that when he came out of prison after 26 years, he tells this funny story because he had this self-deprecating humor that when the general called them and said that they're going to be released, he got a fax that morning. Everybody was excited about being released. Uncle Cathy asked, "What's a fax?" It's a funny story, but as he settled into life, he's grappling with technology so that he could tell stories. His life at the computer, his determination to apply most things. There are some things he didn't achieve. Driving after all those years became too difficult for him in Joburg, but in most issues, he didn't allow the separation to become an obstacle to what needed to be done. The tirelessness in his commitment to share. In the last year, I think he had about 200 engagements before he went into hospital. Now, These are meetings with people, they're addressing people, they are
Nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was the man. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I please call on a good friend of Ndata Kathrada, Mam Barbara Masekela?
I'll be very brief. I just thought that when we are asked to speak about somebody who's left us, we always speak about ourselves and not the person, because it is about how that person affected your life and in a way contributed to what you are. But I just thought I'll take this opportunity to ask everybody here, especially the young people, to go to their computers and look for a newspaper called New Age. The New Age newspaper. I was a teenager, I had matriculated, and I had opposed my parents and said, I'm not going to a Bantu university. So I was waiting that year to be accepted at Roma College in Lesotho. So a friend of my mother's, who was a trade unionist, I had been working in a factory for about 6 months, and it was unbelievable. I had no idea what it meant to work in a factory. That year that I worked in that factory, it was there were dresses that were in fashion that had a little, small band to hold the dress up. And my job was to turn over these straps all day. By the time I got home, my hands were so sore, but I had to go back again. And all I did was to turn these strips so that they could then be sewed to the dresses. Anyway, my mother's friend said, no, I think that there is a job at New Age, and I'm going to take Barbara there. So I was taken to New Age, and I got a job in the subscriptions department of New Age newspaper. And my boss was Wolfie Kodesh. And that is where I met Kathy, where I met Comrade Kathrada. And whenever I used to see him, especially if there were other people around, I would remind him how handsome he was, how aloof he was, how serious he was. I mean, we were teenagers working in the subscription, and we couldn't believe that anybody could be that serious. And we couldn't, we were trying to imagine what his private life was like, and we couldn't, because he just seemed to be somebody who was so single-mindedly devoted to the struggle. That is all. He was single-mindedly devoted to the struggle. And I wish, it's an empty wish, I wish that Comrade Kathy had left us at a happier time. I wish I could say that he was smiling about South Africa when he left us. But it is not so. And I think that's why we feel he's going so deeply, because we loved him and we wanted him to be happy. And I don't think we can say he was. I think all his actions in the last years of his life illustrated his disappointment at the outcome. But like the soldier he was, he continued striving for a better life. We have been a very lucky generation, I think. I think I belong to a very lucky generation, because we have had the opportunity to experience the most courageous, the bravest, the most fearless, the most eloquent, the most selfless leaders. And among them was Comrade Kathrada. And I remember as a teenager, us looking the office, we were on the side of the office there in the dark, and so we could see everybody coming in. And every day we saw Ruth first, because she was the editor. Every day we would watch them arguing, discussing with Kathy. We would see Governor Mbeki come in. I can't really repeat the list, you all know them, but they all were there. And those were our heroes. And we could touch them and feel them and talk to them. And I think because of that, all of us have been very privileged. And I agree with Comrade Sophie de Bruyn that we have a new generation of people. And perhaps we expect them to fight in the same way that the older generation did. They can't. They will not, because they did not have the experiences that we did. But I hope that from time to time, they will go back and look at our hero. And especially, I hope that they will look at a newspaper called New Age, which fought for the rights of the people, which gave us another perspective of the independence movement in Africa, because all the other newspapers were telling about the raping and the riots and whatnot, but the New Age put it into perspective and told us what was happening in what we may not then have considered our own lives, but which was our own lives, because we have since discovered that there is no way in which we can look at ourselves as apart from the rest of the world, which is struggling up to now. And Comrade Kathy, Comrade Nelson Mandela, and all the other comrades, one of the greatest things that they did is to show us that we are part of the human race, that we are not experiencing something that is different from the rest of the human race. They helped us to see ourselves as human beings first. Hence, their conviction that nothing would work in South Africa except a non-racist, non-sexist, democratic, united South Africa. Rest in peace, Comrade Kathy.
Thank you very much, Me. I'd like to call on the High Commissioner of India, to give us a brief reflection as well.
Thank you so much. all the elders of the struggle, eminent dignitaries present here today, distinguished South Africans, members of the media. I have known Ahmed Kathrada for the 2.5 years that I have been in South Africa. And yet, I have some lovely memories of him. But I feel that given my short exposure to him, it is perhaps unfair of me to take a lot of your time, because all of you are replete with memories that you have shared with him over a lifetime. To me, being with Ahmed Kathrada was like being with history, because he was not a bystander, he was not an observer, he wasn't a student or a reader of history. He contributed to the making of history. And it was an amazing thing to see how disarmingly innocent he was, because he never showed any indication that he understood what a great man he was. That is how I would remember him. And I'm sure all of you would remember him with equal affection and fond memories. India has been a privileged partner of South Africa in its struggle against apartheid. We have been happy to have stood with South Africans in this struggle every step of the way. We are all proud in India of the contribution that has been made by Ahmed Kathrada to this struggle. In this hour of grief, in this difficult time, as your friend, we stay by your side as your friend. Every younger generation has to struggle to make a better tomorrow for themselves and their future generations. But I think in South Africa, the younger generation is extremely fortunate and privileged that they have the legacy of the likes of Ahmed Kathrada to build upon. I hope his values and his life will be cherished just as we cherish him today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We have 2 more speakers, and if I could ask that when they get here, they try their best to be brief. Could I please call on Rashan Dadu, who is the daughter of Yusuf Dadu?
Thank you. Well, I actually didn't know Uncle Kathy for most of my life. And in fact, for most of my life, I never thought that I would meet him. I was born after the days that other comrades have described here. Auntie Sophie, Uncle Mosi, Auntie Barbara, where my mum worked in the New Age office, and described how Uncle Kathy had worked with my dad and the other comrades of the day. I was another generation, now an old generation, but still younger than their generation, born in exile in London, where we didn't have any family. There was me and my mum and dad, but I knew that I had all these uncles in a prison on an island in South Africa. And of course, Uncle Kathy was one of them. And my mum used to make me write letters to the prisoners, and particularly to Uncle Kathy. And I hated doing it because I never knew what to say. I thought that they'd be jealous and upset if they knew about me, this little girl, you know, living free out of prison, running around. Of course, later I learned that they loved getting these letters, of course, and hearing about the children of their comrades and friends. But I used to write these letters about what I was doing, what I did at school. And then there'd always be, my mum would say, and you must say, and there'd be like a phrase. And only years later, I realized it must have been a kind of a, not a code, you know, like there was some meaning. She'd say, you have to say, Mummy and Daddy are doing fine, you know, in spite of it all, or some phrase like that. Which, yes, so I realized much later in life, of course, that there was more than my little letter going on there. But I never then thought that I would meet Uncle Kathy in person. And of course, when I did, it was wonderful. He had such a good sense of humor, and he told me many stories about those days and the parties and the goings on politically and in the social life of the comrades, because I think it's important to remember that he was a person who understood people, who loved people, and I think that is why he connected across generations with my generation and, of course, more recently with younger people. And in fact, one of the last times I saw him was on the Fees Must Fall demonstration in Pretoria, where he emerged out of the tear gas and there was a water cannon going by. And at that moment, I saw Uncle Kathy walking with Shan, strolling along the pavement, chatting to the young students and people that were there. So, of course, I went to greet him. But what other leader would do that? What other leader of ours would have the courage of his own convictions to support the students and to speak with them, to try to understand their ways of struggle, what their demands were, and to support their demand for free education? When my dad died, of course, it was many years ago, and Uncle Kathy was in Poolsmoor, he wrote a very lovely letter in which he described my father. He said he was my leader, my colleague, my father, my older brother, my guide, my mentor, my friend. And I think that those are words that now me and many, many of us here would apply to Uncle Kathy. So I want to say I think we really must learn and remember his example, because he wasn't just a leader, he was a man of principle. And I think that's where we have to take our cue. People earn leadership, earn respect from people. And unfortunately, many of our current leaders have lost my respect and the respect of many, I think, of my and indeed older generations. And we can't shy away from this. We can't gloss over this and pretend this isn't going on. And I think one of the best ways we can remember Uncle Kathy is to think about him and how he stood out for what he believed in regardless, in the hardest of times, which were both then when he was in prison in the island in the early days, but also now. I think these were very, very hard times for him, to have struggled his whole life for an ideal and still see people he thought were comrades and friends making decisions and doing things that can only be described as against what he had stood for. And so I think that's why he could connect with other generations. It wasn't about age. It was about having that belief in principles, in values, being able to rethink and think again and think, what do we need to do now? Not resting on laurels, not accumulating stuff for himself. People have mentioned his humility and his lack of showing off and being aggrandizing about himself and the role he played. And I think that's something we must never forget, and particularly at this very moment, and not be afraid to call out those leaders who are not doing that, who are no longer our leaders. Hambagachle, Uncle Kathy.
Lastly, I'd like to please call on somebody from the Isidingo cast. As Sean mentioned earlier on, Mr. Kathy made a big deal of making sure he never missed an episode. And I know that you guys know that, and that is why you're here, and you had some level of relationship with him, so it's only fitting that we hear from you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning to you all. Yes, Uncle Kathy was a huge fan, and he made every attempt to watch the show and took every opportunity to remind us that he was always watching. Isn't it fitting that we are here today at the Nelson Mandela Foundation to remember Uncle Kathy? These were comrades, brothers in arms. They stood side to side, they fought side to side, they served time together. And now, there is a reunion of sorts going on. And I can imagine Madiba and Uncle Kathy and many others joining in with their recollections of what it was at the time that they led us to freedom. Also, this is a center of memory. This is a repository of all those amazing moments in time in our history that have become the basis on which we are building a country, and we still do that even today. It was the occasion of Uncle Kathy's 80th birthday that we remember Sam decided, with her very mischievous idea of hers, that she was going to get Uncle Kathy onto Isidingo because that was his favorite show. And she arranged it with Pumla, our executive producer, who's here today, and said, let us feature him in a scene on Isidingo, and it's going to go out as part of the normal episode. And so it was written. And Uncle Kathy arrived, and we had the script ready for him. Not that he cared. Because we had Kim Engelbrecht in the scene with us, and you know where his eyes were. He decided that he was just going to have fun with the scene. And it can be very daunting for anybody walking onto the set of Isidingo or any of the big soapies in the country. It's a very professional, very technical environment. But he was just himself. And he just enjoyed the moment. And the lights were on and the cameras were all around him. And we did a quick rehearsal. And he was kind of there, but also not. And we were wondering, oh my goodness, how many takes are we going to do? And we went for the first take, and he nailed it. I can tell you now, he made up his own lines. And they were spot on, every one of them. And it was a long scene, a 2-page scene, and he wasn't intimidated at all. He had so much of fun. When we had called cut, he was about to walk away. And we had to call him back and say, Uncle Kathy, we have to do another take. And he says, why did I do something wrong? And we said, no, this is... It's not that you were actually perfect. He says, oh, it must have been the cameras then. It's amazing to think, as a professional actor, in my career, I can count a number of roles that I've played. But for Uncle Kathy, some of the roles that he played were actually all about life and death. The stakes were that high. There were times that he had to hide, to disguise himself, and lived for many years hiding from the security police. He had to grow a beard and wear dark glasses very often and have long hair in order to change his look, because the police identikits had him in the way that they remembered him. That was the role that you had to play, and he had to do it convincingly. In fact, he was known as a Portuguese person. Now, quite how he could pull off that role, I have no idea, because I'm still battling trying to play an Indian. But he was absolutely incredible. And there were so many roles over the years when it was demanded of him as a true loyal comrade, he would play the role of a leader, of a fighter, of a teacher, and of a guide. When he needed to play that role, yes, he was a prisoner as well. And when he came out of that role, again he resumed his role as leader, teacher, and guide, always living by a code, carrying his dignity about him as an example to others of how to stand up against injustice, how to make yourself heard, how to speak truth to power. And he continued doing that. Even up until the last days of his life, he knew when something needed to be said. And I wanted to remind the elders in our room today, yes, you have in your company those of the younger generation who will fearlessly keep that torch burning in his name, in his honor, because we too have a need to speak truth to power, to fight against the injustices, and to remind our leaders of today that there were those who were just a few, like Uncle Kathy, who believed in service through sacrifice. And that's what we will continue in his name, as one of the few. On behalf of the cast, the crew, the production of Isidingo, we want to extend our deepest sympathies to the Kathrada family and their friends and the many, many colleagues. He will be remembered as one of the few. Thank you.
We are wrapping up the program. I'm going to call back to the podium the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Mr. Sello Hatang. But from me, once again, condolences to the family. But thank you, Mr. K. Thank you for your selflessness, your humor, your standing with principles throughout your whole life. It's done a world of difference for me and many others like me. So tomorrow, when you all attend the funeral and however else we remember him, please rest assured to his comrades and to him and his family that, like was just said just now, we will do everything in our power to stick to him as an example in our daily lives. Thank you very much for coming this morning.
Thank you very much, Lunga, for having run this program so ably. I know that most of us would have wanted to say a word, and it's impossible to do so with the many who actually should have said something. I'd like to recognize at this moment people who are in the audience who should have had a moment to say so, and all of you who should have. I'd like to recognize Mark Haywood, who and the civil society organizations that are here, leaders of our civil society. To also mention that the Luthuli Foundation, the Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation also released a statement earlier on about this moment. Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza, who's here with us, Premier Makura, MECs here present, so a couple MECs here present, Professor Khosi Tsile, who's here in front, Justice Yakub, who is a friend and also a neighbor of Mr. Case. So the blow must be double for you, because that knock will not happen again, because Mr. K is no more. And your wife, thank you very much for coming through. Deputy Minister Makwetla, thank you very much for being here, and all government officials who are here present. Bishop Mpumlwana, one person who would have mentioned that Uncle Kathy is now going to the other side to be that ambassador of hope from the other side. Former Minister Bridget Mabandla, the Diplomatic Corps, Tate Mandalanga, and then many others who are here. We would like to thank you very much. Kath, Hlubi, thank you very much for being here. Nelson Mandela called him a person of strong opinion and sharp insight. To all of us at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Ahmed Kathrada is more than a hero of the South African liberation struggle. He is Mr. K, a lovable and loving friend of the Nelson Mandela Foundation and Madiba for 67 years, and a long-time friend of the NMF. Having served Mr. Mandela as his parliamentary councillor for 5 years of his term as president. Mr. K was a familiar figure at our offices. He knew our names, treated us each as people with great value. He knew how to make us laugh, and he knew how to make each one of us feel special. We went to him for assistance whenever we saw needed. And in fact, worth remembering for the staff of the Nelson Mandela Foundation is when he took us to Robben Island and gave us a treat, an absolute treat of going through the Section B of Robben Island. Mr. K liked to give us gifts. Often when he had been given sweets, if you didn't know that, we were the beneficiaries. And those chocolates and delicacies, we enjoyed each one of them on his behalf. So he'd send them to us and say, share them. When he retired from our board, instead of us giving him a gift, he then gave each staff member and trustees a signed copy of of his books as a gift. That was the generosity of the man. We will never again see him walking through our doors with his characteristic careful, slow walk that he was always calculated, every move. When he gets to the stairs, he says, no, don't hold me as long as I can hold on the other side. We'll never again hear his gentle voice greeting us and teasing us about all manner of things. All our hearts broke when we heard Mr. K delivering his eulogy on the occasion of Madiba's passing, calling him his elder brother. He said, my life is in a void and I don't know who to turn to. Mr. K, our lives are in a void and we also don't know who to turn to with your passing. In fact, these were the words Madikizela Mandela last night when we saw each other at the hospital. We'll turn to all your memories that you left us. We'll treasure the moments we had with you, and we promise to live up to your legacy. As you get to the other side, I want you to tell Dulcie September, to tell Ruth Mompati, to tell Steve Biko, Ruth First, Walter Sisulu, Irene Mukwai, Raymond Klaba, Govan Beki, Joe Slovo, Lillian Goy, and many others. Tell them that you left people who won't let them down, people who will fight to the bitter end to make sure that those values that they held dear will be carried through. Tell them that we will fight for a non-racial country, one that won't be xenophobic, because that's one thing that you felt strongly about, that one that will be non-sexist, but also one that will be corruption-free. Tell them that we are here to finish the work for you. I'd like to now urge you to please watch the video with us, and then at the end we'll then sing the national anthem. Thank you very much.
We're coming down in the lift, and a young lady of about 9 or 10 came in, and you said, how are you? How is my sister? And this young lady said, you'd be very proud if you had a sister like me.
Yeah. But those little children were very political.
Yes, of course.
Whenever they saw a white person coming into that building who was not known, any white person that the children did not recognize, they assumed must be a policeman. So as soon as that white person entered, they were waiting for the lift, these children would run up the fire escape and warn, uncle, uncle, police. So they were very political. But in 1960, after Owak Tambo was sent abroad, you started practicing from the flag.
Yes.
Every day after treason trial and during adjournments, you used to have your law practice from there.
Now you remember, one day there came a chap who was blind in one eye. But you objected with that very forcefully. And we had to look for another office because I don't know why you hated this chap so much.
No, he was very rude. Very, very rude. He just dismissed me and very rude to me. So I must have reacted angrily also if he was reacting, because there were so many of your clients that were coming there.
Yes, quite. Who is now using Culvert House?
The flat is still in my name.
I see.
But you remember Amin Kaji?
Yes.
Who took you to Botswana when we smuggled you out when you went. When I was under house arrest and I couldn't get visitors, Amin was working somewhere else. So I called him back. I said, please come here because I'm not allowed to have visitors. You must take responsibility for my visitors. So he took responsibility. And when I went underground, I left the flat to him.
I see.
So we are still going into some sort of recognition. I'm told that some representation has been made to Palo to declare it a heritage site.
I see, that was good.
Yeah.
Well, those were interesting times.
Yes.
I hope that the records will be accurate because it shows what other groups did for all of us.
Yes. And your close relationship with Ismail Mir and J.N. Singh did help politically as well.
Yes. Those days, to have something with members of other race groups was very dangerous.
Yes.
What we did.
Because you people, being law students, were a lot of discussions, and at that time the Youth League was still not in favor of cooperation. And you may still remember a meeting, informal discussion rather. Ismail, J.N., yourself, Oliver, and Walter. And at that time, the Youth League's attitude was non-cooperation with the other organizations. And then at that informal meeting, Walter broke ranks, and Walter said, no, there's a lot of merit in what these chaps are saying about cooperation. On your way to the station, that time there were no motor cars. You and Orr were so angry with Walter, so Walter people on the other side. That came from the flat after discussions. But eventually, because one thing we've always stressed, although the Youth League had this attitude, it was not a racist thing. It was more exclusivist. And you had your own reasons, but not racist. Because you're close friends with these chaps. Yeah. Now this is myself. At that time I was occupying the flat. Ismail had already qualified as a lawyer, and he had left, Jayan had left, and I was now occupying the flat.
In closing, I would like everybody to please stand up as we say Hamba Kahle to Dr. Kathy and sing the national anthem with us. Thank you.
South Africa, South Africa. 80 blow van onze hemel, 80 diepte van ons Heer. Voor ons eeuwige gebergtes, van die kranse antwoord geef. Sounds the call to come together, and united we shall stand. Let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa, our land.
Thank you very much. That is the end of today's program. Those wishing to do media interviews, please come to me first.
Thanks for letting me. Thank you.
Tula sizwe ma, tula sizwe ma,
Well, good afternoon to you. If you've just joined us, you're with special coverage here on